I'll never forget when I was 6 and I finally mastered the art of drawing the perfect ninja face. All I had to do was create an oval, and inside that oval another oval, and then 2 eyeballs inside of that oval and a couple lines for eyebrows to create the perfect, intense ninja expression. Well, I even showed my parents. They seemed impressed with my artistic merits. Now, they were so impressed that I decided I was going to surprise them by creating an art project just for them. And I grabbed a giant black permanent marker, and I went upstairs and I drew about 20 ninja faces all over their cream-colored bedspread. When I went downstairs to get them and show them this beautiful artwork I had created, their first response was, "What did you do?" Yeah, not the response I was expecting.
Hi, I'm Lene.
And I'm Jordan, and this is
Bourbon and Babies. All right, we are back in episode 7 of Bourbon and Babies, and we are in a special recording place. We are at Jordan's parents' house because his 2 awesome aunts.
Ants.
Do you say
ants? Like the little creature. That's how I pronounce it.
His awesome aunts are in town visiting, and we're going to get some expert parenting advice, or at least some really fun stories from these 2 lovely ladies. But in the meantime, we have to start with our bourbon.
We do. And scouring the household for ingredients, I created a cocktail this week, which I've called the Pumpkin Patch Bourbon Shandy. So they had a delicious pumpkin shandy downstairs in the fridge. So I opened that up. I used a little Evan Williams bourbon, and I topped it off with a little floater of tea, a little green tea, just to cut through that. And also there's a little sweetness to it, so that adds the sweetness to the cocktail. I think it ended up pretty good. What do you think, Lene?
I'm a fan. I'm a big fan.
So cheers. Let's drink this concocted pumpkin patch bourbon shandy.
It's good. It's not too sweet at all. In fact, I think I like the tea topper.
Yes.
It adds a nice
smoothness to the drink.
I like it. Well, give it a shot. We'll put that original recipe up on the website, and you can probably find it on Instagram in a few days, too. All right, so this week's episode is about unforgettable child-rearing moments and those things your kids did that they tried to hide from you. Maybe you caught them. Maybe you found out years later. So what do you ladies have? What you got?
Well, my son Brett was in kindergarten, and it was around the Halloween time, and the teacher from the class went around the room asking everybody what they planned to be for Halloween. So when they got to Brett, he said he wanted to be a walnut.
A walnut?
A walnut, yes. So consequently, I got a phone call from the teacher that day, and she said, I have to talk to you. This is a very touchy subject. However, I think it's important that you know. I said, I really don't know. She said, well, it's not really a normal reaction for a 5-year-old, but I just thought it was important that you know. So I said, okay. And that day, after school, when the kids came home, I had said to Brett, how was school today? And he said, oh, it was fine. I said, what did you do? He said, nothing much, mostly the regular things. I said, did they talk about Halloween? And he said, oh, yeah, they did. I said, oh, what did they talk about? He said, well, the teacher went around the room asking everybody what they wanted to be for Halloween. So he said, well, Mom, everybody was saying what they wanted to be, and everybody was repeating what everybody else wanted to be, and I figured I'd throw her off a little bit.
That sounds like Brett. I like that.
It does. Thinking outside the box.
I love that.
Exactly.
It's like, if only my kid's teacher would call me to tell me that we have a problem. Your kid is too creative.
Exactly.
Right.
Your kid is not following the norms.
Yeah.
Shame on him. What are you doing wrong as a parent?
Isn't that the truth? Well, I could take it a little further.
Yeah.
When now I have 2 sons. My older son is a year and a half older than my younger son, and my older son loved structure. I mean, he was into the more structure he was given, the happier he was. Should have been in the Army, right? So it was the 4th grade going into the 5th grade. He was going into the 5th grade, and the 5th grade teacher was the same teacher that Eric had the year before. So it was kind of really good because we knew her and she knew us and whatever. And Brett went to school, and I would say by the second day of school, I would drive them to school. I would go back home. The doorbell would ring. I opened the door, and there was Brett. And I said, Brett, what are you doing?
Is this the middle of the day?
This is early in the day. I said, you have to go to school. He said, no, I'm not going to school anymore. I said, what do you mean you're not going to school anymore? He said, I don't want to go anymore. I said, why? He said, because I don't like it. I said, well, you have to go to school, honey. And I would pick him up, and I would drive him back to school. And this would go on. He'd come home the next day, and I'd say, you've got to stay in school. I told you, Mom, I'm not going to school. I quit school.
I said, school.
All right. So I said, you can't quit school. If you quit school, the police are going to come and arrest you.
Wait, how is he getting home from school? Are you really close?
He walked.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I would say it was about a half a mile, not that far, and in a neighborhood. So it was. So the next thing I know, his teacher calls again. I'm getting a phone call from a teacher, and she says, "I don't think I'm his type." So I said, what does that mean? She said, well, I don't think that Brett and I see eye to eye. I said, I know, he's been quitting school every day. She said, yeah, I know. I think maybe he needs to see the school psychologist.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So I said, okay. Mrs. Weissman was the school psychologist. She had made an appointment to see Brett the next day, and I got a phone call. Mrs. Mackin, yes, hi, it's me, Mrs. Weissman. I just saw Brett. I said, oh, okay. So she said, this is the first time in all my history of being in the school system that a child has walked into my classroom. I looked at him and I said, Brett, do you know why you're here? And he said, yes, and it's about time you called me. So I said, oh, I'm sorry. She said, don't be sorry. She said, I didn't even have to go further. I realized he was right. He was in the wrong class. He needed to be tested for gifted, but the class he was in was very structured, and he couldn't possibly have done what he needed to do in that class. So I'm going to test him, but I'm also going to move him before we even get the results of the test.
Wow. 37 years ago, this is how they handled it. What do you think would happen now? Jordan, you're a teacher. You're in the school system. What would happen?
I can't see it being too different. I mean, they would definitely send them probably to the school counselor to figure out what's going on. If needed to be transferred to gifted talented, would do that. I don't know if they would switch classrooms, though. I can't see, because
they're pretty strict about once you get in the classroom, you're in that classroom, because they don't want parents calling constantly asking them for their kids to be moved. But there is something to that idea that you thrive under certain leadership styles.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Our daughter, she loves structure. She needs structure.
Right.
She's a rule follower.
Right.
But I love that they responded that way.
Yes, I do too.
So you mentioned earlier, Aunt Fran, that your son gave you an excuse for something for a really long time, and you didn't find out until years later. Tell us about that.
I found out a lot of things after my children grew up and moved on in their life. For years and years, my son used to have a big black mark over his bed. And I couldn't understand why there was a black mark right over the head of his bed. So one day I said, Jeff, what is that? Why is that, there? And he used to say, oh, Mom, I lay in bed and I throw a basketball up because I have that basketball in my room, and it's kind of like relaxing to just throw it up on the ceiling and it fall down, throw it up on the ceiling and fall down. Well, P.S., I would say probably 5 or 6 years later, I found out the truth. He and his 3 best friends were in his bedroom, and they decided to light helium strings on helium balloons. And as the balloons rise to the top of the ceiling, they burst. And those black marks were all from bursts balloons.
But like on fire.
Like on fire. Because the helium will light up.
In his room.
Right.
He's just practicing for his time that he becomes like Tom Cruise in Cocktail, so he can light things on fire and impress people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Right. So,
What else did you find out years later that your kids had done?
my daughter, my middle daughter, Debbie, she had a parrot. She got her parrot when she graduated 7th grade. But Honky was like her best friend. And she was a hysterical kid. She taught the parrot to say a few words. She would take her unicycle down and drive down the street.
Wait,
with-
time out.
Yeah,
Time out.
yeah.
She had a unicycle.
She had a unicycle, yeah.
Your family is much more interesting than my family.
Right. And she would ride down the street with the Honky on her shoulder. And everybody in the neighborhood would come out to see Honky.
You had a circus.
But
You
I had a
legitimately had
circus.
circus children.
Other things that I found out, I learned a lot about Jeff after he moved out of the house. But I also learned a lot about Jeff while he lived in the house, because I would venture to say I was a very involved mom. I always had to know what was going on. And my house was the house that the kids hung out in, which was wonderful. But I would say he was probably in 10th or 11th grade. He was working for his dad on weekends, and he asked me to go into his desk drawer to get something out that he needed to bring somewhere after work. So I went into his room and I opened his desk drawer, and I couldn't get the drawer open. There was something stuck under the drawer. So I pulled the drawer out, and I saw an envelope under the drawer, which I took out, and I opened it up, and in the envelope was marijuana.
He was holding out on you.
He was holding out on me. I started to cry. I was like, it was way beyond what I ever expected. And the first thing I did was call my best friend. And I was on the phone hysterical. And I said, Debbie, what do I do? How do I handle this? I'm not sure. And she said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. So I hung up the phone and I thought long and hard. I took the marijuana. I flushed it down the toilet.
You didn't give it to me?
No, I didn't. I went to where he was working, and I asked him to come out, and I said to him, listen, I found what you wanted me to bring you, but I also found a bag of marijuana under your drawer. I called the police, and
really
they
call
are
the
going to
police?
come, yes, they're going to come here to arrest you, because that's not allowed. You cannot do this.
How old was he?
He was 11 years old.
He was 11?
11th grade.
Oh,
11th grade. I'm sorry.
11th grade.
Right. Well, he started to cry, and he said,
One of my friends.
it was not mine. I'm holding it for my friend Brian. Your friend Brian? Did you lose your memory? Because 2 years ago, I got a telephone call when you were in Corvettes for stealing CDs. And when I got to the store, you told me you didn't do it for me. I did it for Brian. And so he says, Mom, please don't call. I said, I called the police already. Oh, Mom, what am I going to do? And I wanted you to know that you better tell your friend I flushed it down the toilet. Well, he came home with me, and he was like shaking in his boots because he was really afraid. I didn't call the police. I didn't, because I just didn't know what that would do for his future. I had to put a scare in him.
Did you?
I did flush the pot. I did flush the pot, yeah. And also, the whole thing with him stealing those CDs, I said to him, I don't understand why you would do this anyway, or even hold this for somebody else. If you were going to steal something and get caught, do it for yourself, not for somebody else. Don't do it. Why would you put yourself in that position?
Okay, so working in schools and seeing the dynamic between the different kids, I totally understand why he'd do it for someone else, and the way of impressing them. And a lot of those kids that, would want you to do that for them, those are the kids that almost you're scared of in school. And I definitely see this on a daily basis of there's kids that do the wrong thing over and over again, and that they're not, quote unquote, the good kid, but you could either have them on your side or you could have them picking on you. And it's much better to have that kid on your side, so that your life is easier than to go against them and have them picking on you all the time.
I get it.
But this also assumes that he was telling the truth.
Exactly.
And that he actually stole them for a friend and not for himself. Because we've all been there where, like, we've blamed our friend for something bad that we did. So looking back on it now, what do you think? Do you think he really stole the CDs for his friend Brian, or do you think he stole them for himself?
I think he stole the CDs for his friend Brian. I think the pot was his. Right. That's really what I think.
So, Anita, okay, Aunt Anita is a therapist, and so she works with a lot of people. And I would be curious to know, when we're talking about that situation where you're doing it to impress someone, how would you approach that with your kids?
How would I talk to them about that?
Yeah.
I would probably just understand for sure that their need was they didn't want to be bullied, or they wanted to feel cool, really cool. So I think what I would do is talk to them about it and try to understand where they're coming from and what made them feel that way, and then ask them, what do you think you could do or would do if you felt a little more secure with who you were? He said, but I didn't, they would say, and I had that with my children as well. They would say, you could ask me that, but that wasn't my reality. My reality is that there's a lot of peer pressure, and I wanted to be one of the cool kids. Be careful, because you don't want to jeopardize your own well-being based on wanting to be one of the cool kids. And that would be...
Yeah, you kind of have to accept this for their normal. I think that's so interesting that you say that. That is their normal. We can talk it to death, but the reality is you can't reason with fear and anxiety around that kind of stuff, around status and around the social issues that they're dealing with.
In fact, this leads me to tell you an interesting story about my oldest son, Eric. When he was in high school, he very, very much identified with the London group of adolescents that were in Haight-Ashbury Park.
Like Sex Pistols and
exactly.
like the punk.
He was so into all those punks, and if any of you know any of the history, that was a time in England when it was very depressed, and so these young adolescents would come out with these crazy outfits and these songs, angry songs, and all because of the depression that was existing at that time. And here he lived in a very nice area, in a very nice home. Right? And it seemed strange that he would identify with something that he really didn't have that identity. Certainly his reality wasn't the same. So my husband and I decided that when he was in the 10th grade, we were going to send him to England, because the idea was, let him see what he's identifying with and realize that perhaps it's not appropriate. So we had this thing where he was sent to England, a couple of classes in one of the schools. I don't know what. He was taking one class, I think it was on creative writing, and then he also was learning how to jet ski. And I figured, well, he'll be in that atmosphere and he'll get a sense of who he is as opposed to what he's identifying with. Well, he had a great time. It was 3 weeks in England, and we went to the airport to pick him up when he came home, and he walked off the plane. Oh, wait, let me just interrupt. I have to tell you that my son Eric had a thick head of curly blonde hair and big blue eyes. And when he stepped off that plane, he was in a black afro.
I can't imagine that.
He had shaved the sides of his head. He came out with this rooster-type hair. And I said, oh, my God, what did you do? And he said, what do you mean, what did I do? Not only did he identify with them, but he became one of them in Haight-Ashbury Park, having American tourists take pictures of him as one of the punk rockers. So there you go.
So it backfired a little.
Backfired. Like you went home and shaved Brett's sides so that he could look like him.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have pictures that you can share of this?
Of Eric like that? I do.
Oh, and Brett. I want to see Brett too.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So what about now? What's he like now? I mean, I obviously know him, but to share with our listeners what he's like now. Do you think that he still sort of embodies that?
I think he definitely thinks outside of the box. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. But he is very creative. Listen, I have to be really honest with you folks. Before he would go to school in the morning, he would be in the bathroom, and he would take Knox unflavored gelatin to pick this rooster hair thing up. And I would stand out the bathroom door looking at it and going, wow, that's amazing.
Right? That's a time investment, getting that look together.
I love that he was so committed to his interest in that culture, and I think that's really fascinating. And I know it backfired, but he totally has that sort of rebel,
Yes, always.
that rebel
Always.
soul.
Eric marched to his own drummer. He
I
always
think
did.
both my boys did.
And he's very, very bright. And today, he's a dad, married, with a highly respected position in the world, making a very nice living. So and he still has a piece of that in
Yeah,
him. And
he's a
he'll always
he's a
have
writer.
piece of
He's
that
a
in
writer
him.
too.
Right. So,
And his kids are cool,
Oh yes,
right? His kids have like a totally unique view of the world too, and
That's
they've taken
exactly
that from
right.
him, and
They're
I just think that's
definitely his
beautiful. Yeah. So see, even if your kids have very bizarre tastes, according to you, they might still turn out okay.
oh absolutely. Maybe even more than okay. Great.
Right.
And they are. I think the most important thing about parenting is to get to know who your child is and reflect that back to them. Not who you want them to be, not how you think they should be, but who they are, so that they can feel comfortable in their own skin and validated for who they are with acceptance. That's exactly right.
Oh, I love that. That is such the perfect wrap up for this episode. Thank you, Aunt Anita. Thank you, Aunt Fran, for being on the episode.
Sorry to all my cousins who have become the subjects of this episode. Please don't hate us. We love you very much, and hopefully people will learn and be entertained by your stories. You've all grown to be wonderful human beings, so even if some things you did in your past were not the best, we love you very much, and you're wonderful now.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. And that's it for episode 7. Episode 7 of Bourbon and Babies podcast. If you haven't already, check out our Bourbon and Babies Straight Up Parenting podcast group. It's a group for fun parents to share some of your epic wins and epic fails. So join us there, and we look forward to hearing from you next week.
Have a great week, everyone.